All right, well, welcome everyone. Many, many friends of Leah's, really happy to see you. My name is Elizabeth Fischel, and I'm thrilled to be introducing my dear friend Leah. She is not only a friend, but she was also a longtime member of the writers group that I've been leading for years in Oakland and now on Zoom. Once known as the Wednesday Writers, now the Friday Writers, since we've changed our day. It's always exciting to celebrate a new book, but especially so when it was birthed and worked on in our group, as is the case with My Marriage Sabbatical, a memoir of solo travel and lasting love. This book is Leah's personal story of pursuing her dream for a year of solo global travel at age 60, a kind of later life gap year, while her husband Chuck stayed at home where he wanted to keep working as a psychiatrist. It's about how partners in a long-time marriage negotiate separate dreams while keeping their marriage strong. And therefore, it's also a blueprint for other couples who want to follow their dreams in different directions or together. Besides being a sensitive, gifted writer, Leah was also a marriage and family therapist for 30 years, and her lens as a family counselor provides insights on every page, as well as humor, anecdotes, and a bird's eye view of travel, community service, and making new friends from Costa Rica and Guatemala to Colombia, Cuba, Java, and Bali. Leah worked on her memoir for 16 years, and it's a joyful event to see it come to fruition. And I'm now turning over to Leah for some welcome and thank yous.
Oh my goodness. Well, I want to start with some thank yous for what it took to make this afternoon happen. And specifically, I want to thank the Friends of the Orinda Library who sponsored this event, who provided the venue, very nice venue for us to meet, and who have just been solidly behind this project and this type of project. So thank you. I am grateful for you, Elizabeth.
Oh, yeah, likewise.
Part of what happened in that group is I went from somebody who would write little pieces to thinking, oh my God, there's a story here, and let's get the whole story down. So thank you for that, and thank you for the conversations we're going to have today.
Thanks, Leah.
I appreciate Orinda Books for bringing their books here to sell to those of you who want to purchase them. I appreciate every one of my boot camp buddies. These are the members of our outdoor exercise camp, also known as Camp Menopause. But most of all, I want to thank you for all of you who are coming here. And it's a little surprising. Think about writing a book. It is such a solitary endeavor. And you all know what an introvert I am. So it's been a long slog to get to here. I'm thinking of this as a birthday party. We are having this book is finally getting birthed after a very long gestation. And so many people have contributed to delivering it. What I want to say is that this event is called a book release celebration. And I think release is absolutely the perfect word. For all these years, it's been my own private secret, you know? And then suddenly, it gets between covers. It gets it listed in bookstores and Amazon, and it isn't mine anymore, it's yours. And it's a whole bunch of unnamed, unknown yours. And I know you people, so it's really wonderful to have you be the first people who get to meet this new baby. And thank you for being here.
Well, to start us off, Leah is going to read a section from early in the memoir, which will give you a little taste of it for those who haven't had the fun of reading it yet. And then we'll have some questions, and then we'll have some questions from the group.
So thank you. This segment happens the night before I'm going to leave on this sabbatical. I have a plane ticket to go there. 4 months later, I have a plane ticket back. And the rest is going to let itself happen. My sabbatical is finally about to begin. I'm leaving for Costa Rica in the morning. My plan is to progress from easier to more challenging destinations, and I've been told Costa Rica would be a friendly place to start. I must be ready to go because I've been crabby with Charlie. Everything about him bugs me. It takes a while for me to understand what's going on. I think I've been trying to render Charlie unimportant so it won't be so hard to leave him. I confess this to my husband and wonder what I can do to overcome it. Charlie promptly replies, "Why don't you try saying, 'Charlie, you stud muffin, ravish me'?" Laughing, I let myself face the obvious. Life is fragile and finite. Something could happen to me, or to him. In the game of tag, when you let go of home base, you're no longer safe. In the game of life, home base only provides the illusion of safety, but it is a comforting illusion. This solo journey definitely feels like letting go of home base. I had a disturbing dream a couple of weeks before my departure. In the dream, I look down at my hand and discover that my wedding ring is broken. Instead of being a fully enclosed circle of metal, the ring has opened up. The dream nags at me for days. Could I have secret plans for myself that will blow my life apart? The thought is frightening. When I describe my dream to a close friend, she listens carefully and then offers her wisdom. I think it means that you're breaking the confines of conventional marriage. You and Charlie are making more space in your marriage to allow you to pursue your dreams. I feel relief. My friend is right. Charlie and I are loosening the marital ties, not out of indifference, but out of acceptance that we are separate people with separate dreams. Throughout my sabbatical, I will meet budget travelers of all ages. Many will have quit their jobs in order to travel, which means they will face the uncertainty of finding new employment when they return home. Some have rented out their houses or sublet their apartments. They will stay in hostels or homes or campgrounds. They will travel on public buses. While their financial circumstances may differ greatly, these adventure travelers have one thing in common. They've dared to let go. Each of them has relinquished the safe and familiar to make space for the new and unexpected. After so many years of yearning to join the ranks of these explorers, free spirits who set off without an itinerary, a timetable, or reservations, I feel amazed and elated that I finally gained the confidence and found the courage to be one of them.
Thanks, Leah. That is such a beautiful introduction to the thrill of departure and the sadness at leaving wonderful Chuck behind. And it also really encapsulates your main theme, which is how to nurture individual dreams while maintaining a long, loving marriage. So let me start by asking you, how did the idea for the sabbatical and the book evolve? What were your first thoughts about it?
Okay. Well, I would say that probably the first thought happened when I was 22, graduating from college at a time when some of the most creative and imaginative people were going off to the Peace Corps. The Peace Corps was just getting born around that time, and I really thought that would be a wonderful thing to do. And I was really terrified at the prospect of doing it. At that time, it meant going off by myself for 2 years to a place that I would not choose. I'd get assigned. And in my imagination, those 2 years were going to be when the man of my dreams was going to come and go, because I'd be in Africa or Malaysia or God knows what. Not to mention my very conservative, not conservative, politically progressive and emotionally conservative parents would have come unraveled at the prospect. So what does a good college graduate do? I went off to social work school, one of the 2 most boring years of my life. And the man of my dreams was going to show up a little later. But anyway, that missed opportunity just nagged at me. And the way it nagged was I felt ashamed of myself. Can you hear me okay? I felt ashamed of not doing what my heart was singing for me to do, and that lack of connection with myself and that timidity kept me back from something I knew I would love. So the obvious story goes, you know, I had a nice career, I got married, I had a mortgage and children, and then the kids were left home and college was paid for, and like here was an opportunity, and I wasn't going to turn my back on it twice.
Excellent. So many people have described you and the book as audacious. What do they mean, and what do you think about it?
That word doesn't get used a lot. It hadn't come up a lot for me up until I took this journey. There's a Spanish word, audacia, so it's not just an English issue. Here's what I think was audacious. I think what was audacious was being settled into a marriage, and we all know that that means coming home for dinner, making dinner, and being around. And I love my husband. And I had this dream that I wasn't willing to give up twice. So I think what's audacious is these are expectations within a society. They're not rules, but we know we're not supposed to break them anyway. Mm-hmm. And I was 60, and it's like, Somebody once said, you know, when you're 60, you have to turn in your cute card. And I said, yeah, but when you turn in your cute card, you can do whatever you damn please. And so that, I wanted both. And I didn't see there was no physical reason, there was no immutable reason that I couldn't have both, especially if I negotiated it kindly. And so that's what happened.
That's what you did? Very good. You haven't turned in your cute card, but nevertheless.
Sassy, no. Cute,
Okay.
not so much.
Okay. Now for a few of the who, what, where, why, and so forth questions about logistics. During the year you were traveling, tell us where you went and perhaps which of those countries really stood out for you and grabbed you.
Okay, do me a favor, because it's a lot of parts.
Yes.
If I start,
Okay.
remind me what the next part of the
Okay.
question is, okay?
Because how many countries was it? Did you count?
Well,
was it 10?
there were side countries.
I see,
For
okay.
example, in Indonesia, you can only stay for, I think it's like 12 weeks, but you can go someplace overnight and then come back and get a new visa. So Singapore was in there, and another
see.
time I went to Vietnam, and so.
I see,
But
okay.
the places where I really lived,
Yeah.
Costa Rica, Guatemala, came home, Bali, Java, came home, went back to Costa Rica for a little bit more Spanish study, and then Chuck met me and we went to Colombia together. And what I decided is that I really wanted my partner with me. This was when the FARC was still fairly active, and I said that if we were gonna be, that if I got kidnapped, he'd feel obliged to pay the ransom. Whereas if we were together, I thought it was much less likely that we'd be captured, but also that I was practicing what I would say. And he said, what? And in very bad Spanish, I said, if you can get any money out of our children, the more power to you. That was before Shala Darling, not now. And so Colombia, and then Chuck went home and I went to Cuba. And then my mother died and I went home to be with her. And then I realized that I had a one-way ticket home from Guatemala. So I paid for the ticket to Guatemala, and then I got to come home when I thought I would, from the place I thought I would. So.
Now, let me, you sort of alluded to this, and we were going to talk about this a little bit later, but explain about the comings and goings. I think part of the way you negotiated with Chuck was that you weren't just kaboom going away for the entire year.
Yes.
But you were going back and forth and he was meeting you. Tell us about that, how you worked it out.
For sure. When I would say, even up until now when I say I went traveling on my own for a year, people kind of, well, how did that one work out? And you know what they're talking about. So anyway,
but you went for 3 months. And yeah.
This dream had been percolating for a long time before I really sat down with Chuck and said, you know, let's talk about it. I don't know whether this had anything to do with it or not, but Chuck and I spent some time in the Amazon jungle and took a hallucinogen called ayahuasca. The vomiting part is not fun, but anyway, after that, the dream that had been kind of sitting just came out my mouth, and I said, could we talk about it? So we had, I call it marital negotiation because it's structured, and it's a structure that we've evolved over many years. And the short version is, I have a problem or an issue, what are we gonna do about it? And that way of beginning shifts everything. So I've been wanting to travel for years and years, and what would you think about our taking a year-long sabbatical? Chuck thought it was fine for me, but it wasn't going to work for him. So the arrangement that we came up with is that I would travel for 4 months and then come home, check on my mother who had dementia and was heading towards, and was 90, visit our grown kids and many friends, remind my husband he was happily married, do my laundry, and take off again. And so that was kind of how it worked. So after the Costa Rica, Guatemala segment, I came home. And likewise, after the 4 months in Indonesia and Java, came home, and then came home after the Colombia, Cuba time.
And Chuck met you at least a couple times.
Thank you.
Including one earthquake, if I remember.
So Chuck wasn't available to go traveling with me for a year, but he did carve out 2 weeks during each, I said it was like on the quarter system. During each quarter, he would come for 2 weeks and we would travel. And those 2 weeks were in Guatemala and in Bali and Java and in Colombia, where we did not get kidnapped.
Very good. So what were some of your goals for your travels? What were some of the things that you were thinking you wanted to accomplish or experience or?
Good.
Yeah.
I love that question. And it's got 2 answers. The goals that I had, and I knew I had when I left, and the goals that emerged by my not having an agenda, but just kind of following where my heart moved me. I noticed when I came home that if I paid attention to what my camera had pointed at, I had a really good idea what was important to me, and it sure pointed at young children a lot. So I wanted to learn Spanish. I wanted to do some kind of community service. This whole idea had been born out of a summer spent teaching English in Hong Kong as part of a Stanford program. And so I wanted to find some way to have adventure travel for me and something meaningful that I could give back. And I think that the other goal, and I could spend the afternoon talking about that and I won't, but the other goal was to find some way to master that fear that separating from people you love would threaten the lives of either those people or yourself. That was so ingrained in my being and went back a couple generations that it had held me back from pursuing my heart's desire. And I was really ready to push up against the things that had been too scary. So those were my 3 goals.
That's really lovely. Well, let's have another interlude where I'm going to ask Leah to read another short section from the book, a different kind of a section that takes place in Guatemala.
I'd love to back up for a minute, if you don't
sure.
mind. And I want to talk about the goals that found me.
Oh, yes, you did say that, yes.
And it did start from where my camera pointed. I discovered that I loved living in homes with little children. And wherever I went, I would go from the big city airport, visit a couple museums, and then head to a small town and try to settle into the community. And I would stay with families. And I looked for families that had very young children, and some of them are still in my life a couple decades later. I loved living with families and not having to be the mom. And so when I think what was so wonderful about travel, part of it was getting to be part of a really cozy, loving family, and somebody else got to be the mom. The other goal that found me was about play. I think I've always had a sense of humor, and I always loved getting to wander into other people's playful situations. But I wanted to be I got really good at it on this trip. If you don't reach out to other people, you're going to have a lonely year. And I discovered that the best way to find out who's a good playmate is to just make a joke and see who laughs and who doesn't. And the biggest laugh is who you hang out with. So
It's lovely. I realized as I'm sitting here and seeing your 2 delightful grandsons in the audience that you were kind of a grandma in training. I mean, all the families with young children and all the games, and you were getting ready.
When I came home, I had new calling cards made, and instead of the very formal therapist ones, this was bright red, and it said, Leah Fisher, psychotherapist and global grandma.
Okay.
Yes, I think you're right.
Very good.
Okay, so now we'll go to Guatemala.
Okay, lovely.
So my going to Guatemala, I had read in the newspaper that there had been a horrible mudslide in one of the villages surrounding Lake Atitlan. Lake Atitlan is a place that I had visited as a 25-year-old with a friend who had gone in the Peace Corps. And on his way home, he found Lake Atitlan, and he parked there for a couple of years. And so the thought that there had been a terrible disaster in that area was pretty heartbreaking. And since I was getting to go wherever I wanted, I decided I would spend time there. Chuck knew an American psychoanalyst who had developed a children's trauma reduction workbook that had a coloring book that he was using with the children from Hurricane Katrina. And I asked him if I could take that book with me to work with the children who had been affected by the mudslide and translate this into Spanish. And he said yes. I did not tell him I'd have to learn Spanish in order to do it, but I was already getting spunkier. So anyway, and then it turned out while I'm working on this project and I went to a indigenous village called Santiago Atitlan, which was one of the ones around this lake. And they had just put together a mental health consortium, people who came in, mental health workers from different parts of the country, to try to coordinate a response to this. And lo and behold, I got invited to be part of this nascent organization. So during my early weeks in Santiago Atitlan, I repeatedly embarrassed myself by mistaking one traditionally garbed Maya person for another. One of the social workers invites me to accompany her to a training session for local midwives. Even though it is conducted in Sutuil and I comprehend nothing, I'm fascinated to encounter the women who deliver many of the community's babies. At a mental health commission meeting the next day, I warmly thank the social worker for bringing me along. She gives me a blank look and then graciously accepts my thanks. A few minutes later, in walks the woman who actually took me to the training session the day before. I turn beet red, and my face is still hot at the end of the meeting. On another occasion, I address one of the social workers as Angelica until she finally tells me, I'm Lucia. I don't know anyone named Angelica. Once again, I'm mortified. Must I constantly reveal that all Maya look alike to me? Then one day, the youngest of the 4 children in my host family comes to visit for the weekend. Diana is 26 years old and the only member of her family who speaks English. She lives and works in Guatemala City. Walking into the cozy kitchen and seeing me for the first time, she greets me warmly with, "Hello, Katie." I return her greeting with a straight face, but I can hardly contain my mirth. Here I am, 60-something, gray-haired, barely 5 feet tall, and petite. Katie is 23 years old. She is a towering 5'10" with curly blonde hair, a loud, booming voice, and the strong, athletic body of a former college swimmer. Suddenly, I get it. It's not just me. To a Maya person, all gringos look alike. Diana's faux pas helps me relax and forgive myself until, little by little, I get to know people in town well enough to keep them straight.
Thanks, Leah. That's a great excerpt. One topic that you needed to discuss with Chuck as 2 grown-ups about to be separated for a year on and off was sex. I asked Leah ahead of time if she was up for talking about this, and she said she was. So tell us how you handled that conversation.
Well, first there's an egg, and it's been fascinating how much people you would think had gotten past it are riveted on the idea of the sexual part of our being apart. I can say this because you're my friends. Two people that our publicist had review the book, most of what they had to say was about the sexual issues that came up between us. And it's like, well, wait a minute. There's a whole book about marriage, and it's about internal growth and people around the world, and you're still in the girls' bathroom in junior high. So it's a fascinating topic. So here's how I got myself in trouble. I asked Chuck what would be the most difficult part about being apart for a year. And it was really obvious what he was going to say, okay? And he said it. And I basically said that we would be getting together every 6 weeks or so, given the back and forth, but that I wasn't averse to, like a one-night stand or something like that if...
For Chuck.
Right. A one-sided open marriage, okay? Chuck assured me that he would not get involved, and I assured him that if I were to get in a sexual relationship, it would be because I did want to get involved. So we decided that this would be one-sided. And when the time came that it had a real possibility, it didn't feel as good. And I realized the 1960s were over, and that particular chapter of my life was past. And my husband was a real mensch. So I also went in the middle of all this confusion to talk to a Berkeley couples therapist that we had met with before and who we both really admired and respected. I told him about this, and he said, "That sounds like the dumbest thing I've heard in a really long time." And he explained why. So anyway, that's what happened and what people have been making of it who read the book and review the book. I'm learning something new. I would never in a million years have guessed that that would be so gobsmacking, and it is. So, oh, I want to say one more thing.
Yeah.
It was so gobsmacking that when the book was already at the printer, we decided that I was going to calm down not the story, but the conversation that I had with Chuck in Ecuador, where I said stuff about it. Hey, I lived through the 60s, and this isn't my first rodeo, and whatever. It's like, so that all got watered down, and I'm glad that the reviewer did what the reviewer was going to do before it made it into the printing press.
That was a good trial run then. Very good. Well, what were some of the lasting impacts on your marriage? So the year is over, you've come back. Tell us, did your marriage change? Did your views of Chuck change? Did your plans for the future change? Tell us about that.
Well, there are, both short-term
Yes.
changes and then
Long-term.
whichever ones have
Yeah.
lasted.
Yeah.
I think that one of the things that changed is that we had a year seeing each other separate from ourselves. By the time I came back, the idea of my husband had begun to ring funny. He's not my anything. He's his self. And I think that there was something about being separate and seeing him as separate that was really very helpful. I felt proud of myself for having pulled this thing off. I felt really proud of Chuck for being game for it. It definitely wasn't his first choice, you know, and it was important for him to know that I wasn't going away from him. I was going to something. So there was that. We didn't know we were doing this during that sabbatical year, but when we were back and as we began to reflect on it, we realized that we were reconfiguring our idea of a good marriage in later life, and that reconfiguration involved more flexibility and a more spacious marriage. That was not on my list of goals, but sort of looking back, that was indeed what had happened. And people came up to me before I left and said, "Is your marriage okay?" And I said, if it weren't, I would not be leaving the country for a year. So that this was within the norm of what a good later life marriage could be. And just as an aside, I don't know if they call it gray divorce, the divorce of people over 50 and over 60. And it has gone up, but not only has it gone up, the speed at which it's gone up is the fastest of any other demographic group. By about 30% of people over 60. And there's a story there. And my sense is that the story is that the patterns of marriage, of roles and whatever, that really made sense and really worked when you were having babies and raising them and having a career, that they aren't optimal when you're 60 and 70 and 80. And that, I mean, I did couples therapy. I've worked with couples, and often when they would come in, older couples, they were bored and they were annoyed. And it was stifling. And so I think that our accidental movement into a more spacious, flexible marriage, we are not bored and we are not stifled. So.
And that's really beautifully explained. And discuss how Chuck, I think, was a little inspired by your sabbatical, and a number of years later, you took another shorter sabbatical together. Tell us about that.
Do any of you remember that old commercial that goes, "Mikey likes it"? Okay, this was a story of Mikey likes it. When I came back, because you had visited me for 2 weeks, 3 times, you had gotten a taste of this, and I think Mikey liked it. So when we got back, Chuck said that, what did I think if we were to take a 6-month sabbatical in a few years? So 5 years later, the two of us went off and spent 3 months in Africa, where I had been very interested to understand more, and 3 months in South America, which spoke to Chuck. And it was a really different kind of sabbatical going as a couple. Much more daring, we did much more exciting things, and much less connected to families and community. And they were both delicious, but in very different ways. I want to finish up with the thing about changes.
Yes.
Our marriage got better after, it wasn't worse, but it became enriched by these 2 sabbaticals. But what really changed our marriage in a phenomenally meaningful way was getting locked down by Governor Newsom. That Chuck, for the first time in his life, had to work from home. we were having dinner together, not once a week, but every night of the week. And it turned out I was right, that was what it would take to make me a happy wife. So in the acknowledgments of the book, I give an acknowledgement to Gavin Newsom, who transformed our marriage.
So you traveled the world, but then it was finally resolved when you were quarantined. That's great. All right, well, we had wanted to open up to the group, and Leah would love to answer some questions. I think, does someone have a microphone?
It was this one.
Oh, it was that one. One right in the front row. This person here, yeah.
So Leah, I wondered how you dealt with a woman traveling alone. Were there times you felt threatened? Did you gain the confidence that you could just handle whoever might be in the shadows behind you, or
Yep.
in general?
Do you remember my comment about the cute card? One of the best things about traveling solo was that I had turned in my cute card. I was called.
Oh. Okay.
Guys called me Little Mama. Wherever I went, I was Little Mama. And no, it wasn't scary. It was really delightful. In Bali, transportation was getting on the back of some dude's motorcycle, putting your arm around their waist and going to wherever you needed to go to. And they would say, "Thank you, Little Mama." And as a 20-something, I remember going to Rome, and you cross the street and 3 people squeeze your butt. There was, no, I felt so much safer. And thank goodness boys love their mamas, because so being a little mama served me very well.
Oh, that's so nice. Yeah.
I don't need a mic.
Okay.
Yeah, how does Chuck feel about you sharing so much intimate detail about your life with everyone
In the book,
in the book? Yeah.
let's just say that he and I have had conversations about it, and I found out things about my husband that I had not known before. And it had to do with how generous he was willing to be around my creativity. I mean, I'd never tried writing a book before, and I certainly had never written a book about our marriage. But you read more versions of this book than anybody ought to have to go through. And what he kept saying is, it's your book, write what you want. So it's not fiction. I didn't make up anything. I didn't exaggerate anything. And there was the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I would say that the good made the bad and the ugly not look quite so bad or so ugly. So.
Nice.
Oh, okay. Will
Okay.
you repeat the question?
Okay, sure.
I'll be busy thinking about it.
Hi. So I talked to Misha this morning, and he shares his congratulations. He wishes that he could be here too. And he said, no, guy, wasn't the guy. He's like, it's like we have another sibling. It's like the third baby. So my question for you is, who's really your favorite child?
All right, I'm going to repeat the question. It could only be asked by the daughter of 2 therapists. And so it was asked by Shala, who also conveyed her brother Misha's congratulations, which is really nice. But Shala said that the book is like Leah's 3rd child, and so which child does she really like the best?
Well, I'll tell you, it's the 2 of you, because I would not have wanted to go through a 16-year labor for anybody else.
Very good.
Thank you so much. I actually came in a little late, so if you've already answered this question, I'll come and find you later. I'm curious about the title, a marriage sabbatical as opposed to a life sabbatical or a mommy sabbatical. And I'm curious how you came up with it. It's a great title in terms of selling a book. I love it. But
Bingo.
I'm also just curious about what.
Yes, I love that you asked that question, partly because the original title was Travels Without Charlie. Everybody of this generation laughs. Unfortunately, my publisher was not of this generation, and Travels Without Charlie didn't sound interesting. And it slays me, but the author has certain limitations, okay? I missed my title. I thought it was hilarious. So a marriage sabbatical is a misnomer, and I'm really glad you brought it up, because I wasn't taking a sabbatical from my marriage. I was taking a sabbatical from my work, my life, my marriage, incidentally. Not that it wasn't important, but I wasn't leaving my marriage. It sells books.
I'll take the mic as long as I've got it. This is wonderful, Leah. I was wondering about how you and Chuck negotiated the separation while you were away. Did you have routine ways you communicated? Was it, did you text? Did you call? Did you have to check in? That kind of thing.
Great.
Related to the safety question.
Yes. Well, there are two parts to your question, and I'm going to answer the second one, but the first is, how did we negotiate? We spent a lot of our early marriage negotiating like this. We're both strong-willed. We both have a bit of entitlement going, and there was no reason not to be the winner in any situation. When that became thoroughly exhausting, we really came up with a much more effective way of dealing with issues. Dina, say the question again.
How you stayed in touch, or did you, while you were
Okay, well, the first place I went was Costa Rica, this little wonderful beach town that had a language school about as far from the ocean as the back of this room. And it was a tiny town. It had only one payphone that didn't work, and it had a bank that didn't have money, and it had a internet. This was the days of, help me with the word here.
Internet cafe or?
Cafes, internet cafes, which were where a lot of my home stays, word of mouth, you know, a lot of things happened. And if there was really loud thunder during a storm, it completely cut off everything. So they would say, save it as you go along. However, our main form of communication were emails that ended up being just about daily. And I would struggle along in Spanish all day long, and then I would have my time to go to the internet cafe and write a letter in English to my sweetheart. And it was a little bit like an electronic umbilicus keeping us connected.
Nice. Yeah.
I was wondering if that was Charlotte, who I used to watch when she was in diapers still.
You got to say more. You got to say more.
It's just wonderful that I got to be part of the family for about a year when I was going to school. And so I kind of know some of the insides of the family, which, even though I haven't seen Leah, I haven't seen you probably in 30 years. So
I know. Well, how wonderful that you're here. And Shala was, you picked her up from preschool, so I think it was a while ago.
Yeah.
Yes.
But anyway, I just saw the slide of a little boy. I can't remember his name was Santiago, with a glass that had Fisher. So I'm curious who that boy is. And it had a first name and then Fisher.
Oh, no.
Oh, was it me holding up a sign? Okay. I had gotten to Guatemala first, and after spending a couple of months in a language school in somebody's house with a mattress that started out this thick on the sides and was about that thick in the place where you sleep on it. Chuck arranged for this beautiful kind of lodge place in Antigua. And when I arrived, he also arranged for a driver who had the sign that happened to say Leah Shisher, but it didn't matter. I knew it was me. So when we went back, same driver, I asked if I could have a pen and paper, and I made this Carlitos Fisher, and I stood in line with all the guys who were waiting for people. So that's what that was.
Regarding the emails that you sent daily, did a lot of that get into your book?
I kept journals, and I kept journals thanks to a colleague of Chuck's who was a poet, who said, be sure to keep a journal when you travel. And I did. And the fact of the matter is, I couldn't find most of those email letters when I got back. So I think the memories are in the book, but not specific. And they did turn up. They turned up about 14 years into my writing project. So.
Hi, Leah.
Hi.
Thanks. One thing I've known about you for decades is a passion for community, for finding connection. So I'm wondering if the wanderlust that led to this trip, if you could call it that, is related to that, or are you still on that quest?
I'm really touched by that question. Loneliness took me on the road, and there was nothing lonely about that trip. I would be completely terrified the night before, packing a suitcase. It's like, well, what if I need this? And it's going to be 4 months. Can I take that? Or it doesn't fit. I've got to be able to lift it. And then I would get on the plane, and the moment that plane door closed, I was excited. So there was more community in being in a small town and staying in someone's home and not having any transportation other than your legs, and being involved in a community project. I mean, you can get the picture. It was delicious around community, and I'm really touched that you ask.
Hi, Leah.
Hi.
I wanted to know, so after your travels and all your experiences, how did your life afterwards change? In terms of your work? Like, what did you bring forward in your travels?
I'll tell you my first reaction. I don't remember. In terms of work, I didn't reopen my office. When people I had seen previously wanted help and found me, I did brief treatment, so I'd meet with people up to 6 times. And that was just the right amount of practice to do. I had a mom who had died, the second parent, so there was cleaning out their home and getting it sold and whatever. And when I came home, I discovered that little rats were growing families in the insulation underneath the dishwasher. And I said to Chuck, I've been living in places where they build fires to cook their meals, and but I had to come home to find rodents in my dishwasher. So we did a house remodel. And I guess what happened then is that I was happily gardening and exercising with Camp Menopause, and being kind to my friends, and that and making dinner for my husband. And I began being a housewife. I had never not worked. And so there I was, being a housewife. And somehow at age 65, it felt great. It was the women's movement. It would not have felt great in my 30s, but it's felt great. That's what I did.
And then Ryu was born.
Oh, right. I got to have grandchildren. That's right. That's right. I don't see Ryu.
Ryu, sorry, yeah, they're there.
Hi.
I'm Judy, over here. I'm curious how you found the host homes. Did you just go to a small town and befriend someone? Or had you
A variety of different, no, I didn't arrange anything. The one that comes to mind that was the most interesting, you didn't hear about the earthquake in Java, okay? But after this earthquake that killed 6,000 people, Chuck left to go home. And I went back to Bali with no place to stay. And kind of bug-eyed from the experience. An American who happened to be from California, who happened to be a therapist, who happened to have studied with my same teacher, and who was wearing a beautiful piece of jewelry. I admired her jewelry, and then the next thing, she took me to lunch, and where are you staying? I don't have a place to stay. Well, gee, I know this family I adore, and they have a bungalow that might be available. By that night, I was living in a bungalow next to a 4-year-old named Leah. And we're still very connected. I helped her get through college. And so anyway, that's an example. It's pure serendipity. And I did have this experience everywhere I went. It's kind of like magic, that when you need something, it just shows up. I'm getting some of this. I'd never experienced it. And when people talk about, just trusting the universe, it's like, fasten your seatbelt. But there was a great deal of that happened.
Having seen all sorts of things, poverty and conditions that were not like here, when you came back, did you feel or have any thoughts or feelings about things that might have bothered you before, dishwasher didn't work or that this didn't happen? Did you have a different perspective that has lasted somewhat?
I still don't. Okay.
Okay, the question was, when you were traveling and saw as much poverty and difficult conditions as you did it change your perspective when you got home over small disruptions like mice under the dishwasher or whatever?
They weren't mice.
All right, rodents.
So I didn't see so much of the horrible poverty. And I think if I had, I would have definitely been impacted by it. I saw people making elegant use of whatever they had. And Cuba's a perfect example. We hear about all the oppression and the repression, and it's there. But here I lived in this tiny community with a family that had 2 children, good schools, good medical care, and we would all sit outside on their porch in rocking chairs at night, watching the stars, and the electricity would all go out, and we could see the stars better. And so it was that level. I would get food poisoning a lot, parasites, but I think I was sensitive to them. But it wasn't a huge hardship. And I didn't see people who were staggeringly suffering.
Leah,
Yeah.
this is Margot.
Margot!
Right, so this question should not surprise you.
Okay.
Since we've been out of touch for so long, and I don't know the things you've been doing here, did you do any singing?
I know Margot through the Threshold Choir, which I've been part of for 20 years. The Threshold Choir trains women to sing in small groups for people who are dying, at bedsides, in hospitals, whatever. And I had the good fortune that the Threshold Choir came to Bali while I was there. So I got to travel with them for 2 weeks, and we sang everywhere we went. We went to a sacred monastery, whatever, and it was full of tourists, and it was full of people who were trying to sell things, and they would not leave us alone. Well, in the Bahasa Indonesian language, the expression for "I don't want any" was something like "tika mau." And we burst into this melody of "tika mau" and sang for a little while, and they ogled us at first, and they sort of stopped in their tracks and listened and watched, and then they very quietly moved away. So we sang everywhere.
That's so great. Okay.
I'm curious about language. Did you already know Spanish? What was it like learning Spanish as an older person? How good did you get? Are you still using it?
Great.
Yeah, that was a question about Spanish. Did you know Spanish before you traveled? Did your Spanish get better? How is it now? And so on.
Okay, I knew a tiny bit of Spanish because of the Peace Corps college buddy that I had spent time at Lake Atitlan with. And thanks to him, I knew how to say, dos cervezas frías, and no hay papel higiénico, which means there isn't any toilet paper. But that was pretty much the limit. And I had an absolutely wonderful Spanish teacher at this school on the Pacific Beach, and learned a lot of vocabulary. Spanish has, what, 28, 38, 108 endings to the verbs. Never got to it. And at that time, I was a quick enough thinker that I would think ahead, how can I get that verb in the infinitive while I'm trying to say this? And so that was pretty much how I got along. I got to speak Spanish like a very sophisticated 3-year-old. I never got better. To keep it going, I volunteered at a Spanish immersion preschool in Walnut Creek. And there was a 3-year-old who began correcting my Spanish. So I assumed I would get much better, and I never did. I love your questions. Oh, you know what? It's time for us to move into the next room, have some refreshments. Orinda Books is there to sell you books if you want. Anybody who got a book online and wants it signed, I'm there to do it. And anybody who is planning to get books to send to other people, I'm happy to sign a book plate that you can send either with or after the book. So, anyway, thank you.
Lovely. Thank you.